Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Line, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, his church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. My name is Harrison Allison, and I will be your host today. Do you do the finger dance in the intro every episode?
I don't always hit the table, but yeah, I have a pen usually, and I like pretend I've got a drum set here.
You see, I've never actually watched it visually, so seeing kind of the cues here that you've got here is a little interesting.
You haven't subscribed to our YouTube?
No.
Okay. I'm so sad.
As a Christian, it's always important to stay humble.
Yeah. So for those watching, the big curveball here is that you're the host. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, that's right. You sent me some pretty interesting questions today, and I like some of them, so we'll use some of them. But I actually have some material prepped that you don't know about. You hopefully will be a little bit surprised by. Just a real quick kind of plug for why we're doing this, why we flipped the script today is that after this episode, Craig will actually embark on a 7-week journey of podcast interview with different authors. Craig, being an author himself, wanted to give him kind of an opportunity to speak a little bit about his book in more depth than what he has on the podcast before, but highlight him as an author as well, which he couldn't do if he was interviewing himself.
I mean, I could do it. We could cut and paste. I could like swap seats back and forth, but it would be kind of weird.
A real Parent Trap situation. I don't know if that'd go over quite as well as what we want.
Something to consider in the future.
Well, so I've actually got some notes here, and I want to start off with maybe just highlighting your journey and how you got to where you are. For those of you that may not know, Craig didn't actually start out as a minister. This hasn't been kind of a lifelong career for him. But throughout his life, he has had numerous moments, in fact, where ministry has kind of overlapped. Just a brief intro here to who you are. You didn't necessarily start your earliest memories in America. You're a African native almost.
Yeah, I went over there when I was just a little baby. 15 months old or so. I don't remember America. So my first memories start in Africa. Mom and Dad were missionaries, and that's grew up in the Gambia, West Africa, and it was quite the experience. I do vividly remember when we moved back to America. I could not stand it. I wanted to go back to Africa because America was a very weird place.
Oh yeah. I bet. So this is the early 70s and late 70s that you're spending in Africa.
That's correct. Yeah.
So my research, it's the first 70 years, so 71 to 77 essentially that you're in Africa.
Yep.
Do you want to speak a little bit to maybe some of the cultural foundations of what was so different? What had you craving Africa once you came to America as essentially a 10-year-old, right?
Yeah, so close to 10. Yeah, so I think the biggest difference there was just a sense of community. There was not the individualistic lone cowboy kind of mentality there. It was very much a community. For an example, there would be times when we'd have a piece of candy or something like that, and I would be playing with all of my playmates, and if I gave them a piece of candy and there would only be one piece, there could be 9, 10 other children my age, and they would literally bite that thing and break it until all of them had a piece. Whereas here, if you give a kid a piece of candy and there's a group of friends, that kid's going to just pop it in their mouth. So it even extended down to that level where there was just this sense of community. And when we moved to America, it was more like everybody for themselves. So that was hard to get used to.
Well, your landing place in America is, I think, especially in what is now the 80s, kind of a rough landing spot. You guys landed in Detroit, is that right?
Yeah, Dad took a preaching job. It was actually one of the congregations that had supported our work in the Gambia, and so he came back and filled their pulpit minister role, Roseville Church of Christ, in suburb of Detroit. So yeah, kind of a jungle.
Yeah,
One jungle to the one jungle to the other.
Just a lack of elephants in one.
Yeah.
So Detroit is where you're really kind of spending the early teen years. You know, the real rough. I think probably some of the more formative years of most children's lives. You know, you really get to kind of develop into who you are beyond just like a kid who's playing with frogs.
Yeah.
Was Detroit hard to do that, especially coming from Africa? Did you have any issues in that transition?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there were some adjustment issues for me as an adolescent, going into my teen years. Some language issues there. Not that I spoke English, but it was just a different terminology for a lot of words. I had a strange, bizarre accent, so it was a mixture between proper English, like you would find in London, and an African type of dialect. And so I got made fun of, and I was naturally inclined towards African Americans because that's the only thing I knew. So I steered away from the white kids, and so there was some bullying that took place, and there was a difficult adjustment there.
Sure.
So, yeah, but I grew. I got some friends, and everything worked out good.
Yeah. Early '80s certainly can be a tough time with the big hair. I'm sure.
Listen, I loved the '80s, man. The '80s were great.
Well, I guess that's something that you get to kind of determine on your own. I don't know if that's my favorite decade looking back, but I'm not gonna fault you any points for.
Well, you had to live in the decade to fully appreciate it. Yeah, so.
Well, I missed that one by about almost 20 years.
Yeah,
so
it's okay.
So that's a tough one for me to relate to. So after Detroit, so we've got this African jungle, we've got this Detroit concrete jungle, and then we transition to Middle Tennessee and Tullahoma, Tennessee.
Right.
You end up what is it? Probably your sophomore year.
10th grade. Yeah, moved kind of in the middle. I was in school, and Dad got another job in Coffee County, Tullahoma, preaching at the Bel Air Church of Christ, and that was another kind of hard transition because at that point I had made friends, was established, and all of a sudden I found out that I was moving in the middle of my sophomore year to a place I'd never been before. So that was hard. I did not want to move.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Your mother and father certainly didn't give you any softballs as far as these moves. No easy transition for young Craig Allison.
That's correct.
But it seems like maybe this move to Tullahoma is what maybe I don't know. Based on what my research has kind of shown, lays out the foundations of maybe the ministry and some of the formative ideas in this book that you've written. That kind of come to fruition. So, Tullahoma High, Bel Air Church of Christ, is where your father was the minister there. Notably, does not have a youth minister when you're on the scene. Instead, you've got a guy by the name of Don Midget, who's kind of this volunteer capacity type guy who's putting together these youth events. But it's really not a youth minister position. He still has a full-time job. He's still doing his own thing. So to call him a youth minister would, I think, maybe be reductive to what the audience knows a youth minister to today. Yeah?
Yeah, sure.
But the one thing that I kind of wanted to highlight here is what I would consider, it's hard to consider, your African time. Those first couple of years of your life as you being a missionary. Of course, you're with the family and you've got the burdens there, but you're not doing kind of the same level missionary work.
Right.
I've kind of highlighted this one moment here, and I want to hear you kind of speak to it. In Tullahoma, you go on this mission trip to do a VBS in West Virginia. Do you remember any of this?
Yeah.
I've actually got it kind of pulled up here. Marlinton Church of Christ. When was the last time you were in Marlinton, Kentucky? West Virginia.
West Virginia. It probably would have been that VBS that we did there. My grandparents had established, had planted a church there, and we were there to just do a variety of things for the community. Your typical short-term mission trip, but one of the things that we did was to put on a VBS there. So I would say 10th, 11th grade, somewhere in that time frame.
So you mentioned your grandfather now, which is kind of a cool thing here that you get to have that I don't think that every minister gets to have, especially somebody that didn't start out in early teens saying I'm going to be a preacher. I'm going to be a preacher. That's what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
But your father is a minister.
Mm-hmm.
Your mother's father is a minister,
mm-hmm.
and your father's great grandfather was a minister.
Mm-hmm.
So you're a fourth generation minister here, and I'm sure that was an accident. There's nobody's hand that could have been involved in that kind of lineage of ministerhood, right?
Yeah, and this was not anything I can remember saying I would never be a minister. That was growing up as a minister's kid, preacher's kid. It has all the trappings there that you would think, and it was something that I knew when I got to an age where I could think about what I wanted to do for a career or a living. Being a minister was definitely not in the top 10, top 100, it wasn't even on the list. So my dad got a good laugh out of that when I told him that I was going into campus ministry. And I think that his words were something along the lines of never say never, because you never know what's going to happen.
Sure, absolutely. So we've got this transition from early teen Craig Allison to late teen Craig Allison, and you've got Don Midgett, who's kind of leading the way is this pseudo youth minister. But what specifically makes this different from a traditional youth ministry or the youth ministry that we know to be kind of the unfortunate trend here in America today, which is kind of a drop-off babysitter type youth ministry. It's one that's heavily involved with parents.
Right.
You've got a huge church contribution that's going, and not just like a monetary contribution, but a literal time contributing from everybody involved. Do you think that the experience that you had in Bel Air's youth has kind of formulated this idea of youth ministry that you talk about today? Is maybe some of these ideas is you looking back at something that was so successful and kind of to piece together the things that make that work?
Yeah, I mean, certainly at that time I didn't realize that some of the foundational principles for for youth ministry done right were being laid, and that absolutely helped kind of set a tone for me, especially when I got into campus ministry and began talking to student after student and getting a picture of the type of youth ministry programs that they were coming from. And as I did that, certain things began to materialize. Certain trends kept showing up, and I began to put the pieces together and realized, hey, I experienced kind of the same thing with this type of youth ministry, and it looks different than the kids coming from this type of ministry. And guess what? I'm seeing this pattern repeated over and over and over again. And finally, it's just like a light went off in my head, and I was thinking, wow, there's something to this here. It's not just coincidental.
Okay. Well, let's slow the wheels down just a little bit, and those of you that have read the book maybe kind of are picking up on some of the wordplay here that I'm using. But campus minister, that's once again, Craig Allison does not do easy transitions. Talk about transition from kind of the worldly working environment that you're going into this spiritual environment, this kind of new battlefield that you're taking place on. Is that an easy transition? How does that transition even happen?
Yeah, so I think just a crossroads that I hit in my life, and looking back at it now, I see that it was very directed. God, I think, God had his hand in the direction that he wanted my life to go. I didn't necessarily want to go in that direction, but taking a step in faith. And so it all transpired when we came to Central Church of Christ, just looking for another church to attend. And I was asked to come and do a Tuesday night devotional at the Christian Student Center and liked it. It was a great reception. I connected with the college students, and so that led me to being asked to come and speak at a retreat, which I did. And I remember getting into bed that night, and my wife asked me how the lesson that I had done that night went. And I said something to the effect of, this would be a great job to have. This is like, this would be a dream job to have. Little did I know at the time that I was kind of trying out for the job, because the current campus minister was retiring. And so he had asked the students who they wanted to come and speak at the retreat, and they had suggested that my name be put on the list. So that happened, and then I found out that he was going to be stepping down, and I was asked to consider putting my resume in, which I did. And that's how it all turned out. Same day that I got the job offer to be the campus minister, I was had a job opportunity with the place that I was working at the time. And so there again, I think that that was not a coincidence either, that I had two forces battling for the direction of my life, and I chose wisely.
You wouldn't go so far as to say that maybe God's had a hand in this? Is that what you're
No,
trying
I would
to say
absolutely
here?
go that far to say, yeah, he definitely had a hand in this.
Yeah, I think you've got 4 generations of prior ministers to maybe back out the idea.
There's something there, maybe.
Yeah. I think that there's maybe a trend in this that is something that we should pay attention to for sure. So it's kind of a cool moment that you've got in your life, where you've got literally these 2 different job offers. You've got this spiritual offer, and you've got this worldly offer,
right,
with all the benefits that comes with that.
Right.
Are there any other kind of moments in your life where you've had, I don't want to call it clarity, because I'm not in those conversations. I don't know if there's this true moment of clarity where you're able to just so clearly distinguish, like, this is a God thing, this is not a God thing. Are there any other kind of moments like that in your life that you're able to kind of speak to?
I don't know if you're trying to lead me to something, if you've got something in mind. I'm not sure what to say, because I feel like you're gonna have something there. But what about this moment? So, nothing immediately jumps in my mind other than the next transition, which was from campus ministry to pulpit ministry. That's
that's what we call a leading question, and you have stumbled upon it. So if I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, you are now, of course, Central's pulpit minister, but your offer in what was that, 2024?
End of 23 and going into 2024.
Yeah. So you officially take the spot in 2024. That's not the first offer that you've received from Central to make that transition. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I had turned it down. I felt like I needed to stick to some type of integrity as far as me saying I was never going to be a preacher. The campus minister job is like pseudo ministry. Yeah, and not that I'm not taking away. It is a ministry work, but it's not like a preacher. Like every Sunday you're up in front of a church preaching. So I still had that to kind of say to my dad, I told you I was never going to be the preacher, and I meant it. So yeah, that was definitely something that I wrestled with. That was something that I wrestled with for a while. Didn't think that my wife, Betsy, would be on board with that. Just, I knew what it was like to be a preacher's kid. I knew all the stuff that came with it, and there were a lot of reasons I had for not wanting to do it. The least of which was, what qualifications did I have other than campus ministry, right? So that, I had some doubts and some, is this something that I could actually do and be competent at? What was strange was that during this time I was getting, out of the blue, other churches calling up asking if I would consider being the preacher. I don't even know, where they were getting my name from. Well, there was a couple that I did know, but Betsy, my wife, had noticed that, and she's like, maybe God's trying to tell you something again. Maybe he's trying to push you through a door, and your reluctance to go through that door could be a problem. So, yeah, long story short, I walked through that door again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I don't think that I knew necessarily that you had so many other offers kind of on the table here where you could be looking at, once again, a tough transition for Craig Allison. Thankfully, I think that this time you chose maybe an easier transition. You know, you're moving across a parking lot versus the country or the world. No oceans to cross, at least as far as I'm aware, in that parking lot. But
and I knew the congregation here. They knew me. They knew what they were getting. So, you know, all the hassles of working through a new minister, you know, I was able to avoid that because I had spoken here in front of the church, you know, numerous times over the 12, 13 years as a campus minister. So from that regard, it was not a difficult transition.
Sure. So pulpit ministry, going from having to make, you know, maybe a 10, 15-minute Devo every week to having to put together a 20 to 30-minute lesson. Creative juices are having to fire a little bit more to kind of keep people engaged. You on the other hand, I feel like are maybe overloaded with some of this creativity for the benefit of the members at Central here. We've had your roadmap for the year since January. We've known kind of the direction that all of your lessons were going to go for a long time now. And I mention all that just to kind of highlight this creative streak that you've got going on here. The Lion, the Way, and the War is not the first creative endeavor that you've kind of taken on. I've read some manuscripts of some different books that you've written, not to cause a security issue, at least with your home Wi-Fi, but AGWK is a reference to a very early book that you put together. It's more of a romance. Is that right? A girl worth
kissing.
Yeah. The murder mystery version is killing, but kind of a different twist there to a book. Maybe you can put that one together. So you've written a couple of books. The Lion, the Way, and the War is the main kind of staple here that you've been able to put out. You put together a song or two, if I recall, for Carrie's wedding. You know,
it's my sister.
And then you've got this. Man, I don't even know how to put it into the words. This wonderful, amazing, phenomenal, even extraordinary gift that you were given about a year ago. That's been able to kind of work a creative muscle. This Martin guitar kit. You know, so you are being able to flex some creativity, but in this book, there's a lot of research that goes into that. Not necessarily creative research. Do you want to speak to some of the research effort in this book that you're having to put forth?
Yeah. So the main thing for me, like we alluded to earlier, was just some of the things that I was catching that, from a foundational principle, I had maybe filed away subconsciously about, you know, what a good, effective, impactful youth program looks like. And then seeing the other side of that, you know, as I grew older and being exposed to just a variety of different youth ministry programs. And so as I became a campus minister, I had all of a sudden access to hundreds of kids, young adults that had, for the most part, grown up or been involved in churches, and they were coming from just the entire spectrum of youth ministry. You know, involved, no youth minister, massive youth programs. And as I began sitting down and having interviews with them, and interviews sounds like a very formal word, but, you know, in informal discussions with the different students that would come through, I began to notice some commonalities, and was able to begin to, you know, plug those different things that I was seeing into categories and develop some trending. And didn't do anything with it. I just filed it away just as a, you know, hey, this is potentially useful information. My brain is wired, you know, from a business background, you know, it's wired a certain way to just track data and figure out what is the data telling us. What do we do with this data? How can we utilize this information before us that's going to benefit a company or an organization to make it better. And so that's basically what I was doing in a lot of different areas. Youth ministry was just one. That's leadership is another one that I address in the book, church leadership specifically. And then COVID hit, and I had, as a creative person, I've got to stay busy. I love to write. I all of a sudden had time on my hands that I didn't have before. And so I had a conversation with an elder at that time, and we had been talking about just some of my observations, the success of the Student Center. He was wanting to know, what my program looked like and why it was successful. And so those conversations, grew and became more and more robust. And he said to me, you need to try to get all of this information down so other people, other churches, other leaderships could use this, because it's good information to have. And so COVID hit, and then I had the time, and I was like, this is a perfect opportunity to try to put some sense into this and get it down into some logical, sequential fashion. So that's the birth of the book.
Okay. And in this research, we talked about slowing our wheels earlier. Now I want to talk about the will. One of the early concepts that you introduce in this book is this picture of a wheel. Can you talk to the wheel? Explain the wheel.
Yeah, so it's pretty simple, and it takes a complex, because there's a lot of moving parts in when we talk about churches and families and ministry and all the different things that go into that. And so to make order of the complex, a wheel is something that you can visualize. It's pretty simple. And for me, I used the example of a wagon wheel, where you have the outside framework of the wheel, so that metal thing that runs on the very outside edge, and then you have that inner wheel. An old wagon wheel would be like a wood piece, and then you have the hub in the middle, and what connects the outer wheel, the inner wheel, and the hub together are the spokes. And so the spokes represent all the different aspects that go into the dynamics of our faith walk. So you're talking about things like youth ministry. You're talking about things like, your family, your biological family. You're talking about things like the leadership issues. So you have all of these different components that go into the wheel. And when it's functioning properly, the spokes aren't broken off. The outer wheel is intact. It moves. It goes in a direction that you want it to go. If you take the outer wheel or the inner wheel part in, and you just have like spokes sticking out, those spokes are just going to get stuck in the ground. It's not going to go anywhere. So from an organizational standpoint, a church standpoint, family standpoint, you want to make sure that all those things are working together like they need to work together.
Sure. I think that it's a really good visual way to maybe quantify some of the data in a way that is easier to digest. I think, if I tell you that there's a problem and you need to go fix it, but I don't tell you kind of some of the different components of that problem and how to fix it, it can be pretty tough to identify some issues. Mm-hmm. So we've alluded to it today, and I'm sure over what is it? This is episode 70. Over the past 70 podcasts, you've maybe alluded to it yourself, but you've got kind of a different idea of what a traditional youth minister looks like. Time out real quick. What does the youth minister in today's era, the perfect youth minister, if you're able to build one from scratch, what does that look like? What kind of youth minister in a church is ideal that lines up with kind of these ideas of a working spoke?
He's definitely part of a system that is working in conjunction with church leadership and families. So he plays a supplemental role in the lives of his youth program, the kids that are that. And he understands, and the church understands, and the parents understand. So collectively, everybody's on the same page. They understand that the youth minister is a supplemental resource, not the primary resource. That's a biblical concept as well. So, this is grounded in Scripture. And the majority of the students that I interviewed and talked to, and I'm talking, hundreds of them that represent, a large portion of the Southeast, are coming from the typical youth programs that churches think are successful. Big numbers, lots of activities, and the youth minister is the primary resource for all things spiritual in that child's life. He provides the training and the education, and he is the spiritual mentor. They go to his class. He is the person that's organizing the retreats, being pretty much everything from a spiritual standpoint in that child's life. And the parents are glad to have that happen because, hey, that's what we pay him for, right?
Sure.
And he's got the training to do that. And as a parent, I don't know how to do Bible studies. I don't know how to teach my kid these things. So the youth minister does that. And I can tell you that it is an abysmal failure. If we track the data, we track the numbers, the kids that come out of those type of what we would look at from the outside and go, wow, that's such a successful program, a youth program, because you've got, huge numbers and you do all of these events and activities. Those kids, when they get to college, the vast majority of them, and I'm talking 80, 90 percentile, okay, the percentage, they walk away. They leave the church and they don't come back. As opposed to the ones where they understand that if they have a youth minister at all, that youth minister is, he's a supplemental resource for the family. The family is the primary person feeding the spiritual, the maturation, the nutrition that kid is getting. It's coming from the family. And the youth minister is there to serve as a supplemental resource for that. Those are the kids that come to college, so they leave home and they have deep roots, they have strong roots, and they stay plugged in. Not only do they stay plugged in, they become leaders.
Yeah. You do a really good job in the book of kind of identifying one big component of youth ministry and the role that a youth minister should do. And I really like it. I think if every youth ministry application has this as the number one thing that you have to do, the number one job role that you have in taking this position, it's not to schedule pizza parties, it's not to take people on vacation Bible school trips, it's not to have these really cool camps that do kind of keep these kids engaged and pumped up. But if the one thing that you have kind of outlined on here is a youth minister is responsible for teaching children and the people in their group who Jesus is.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of very many things that are much better kind of qualifiers.
Yeah. And I go into detail on that and talk about it. It's not who Jesus is to your mom and dad. It's not who Jesus is to your brother or your sister. It's who Jesus is to you. That a youth minister needs to look at his one of his primary jobs. And again, this is to help the parents too, not to take away from the parents' role in this, but to really coordinate efforts to have a program in place that creates space for that kid to understand just how important Jesus is to them personally in their life and what that actually means, what that looks like, and how that plays out to the rest of the world. And sadly, the vast majority of kids graduate high school and they have no idea. They come to college and their faith is their parents' faith, not their own faith. So they're riding the coattails of their parents' faith, and it's not a stable platform. And that's why so many of them have that yanked out from underneath them and they flounder.
Sure. In some of the studies that I've been doing here recently, one of the more important things that it's highlighted, and this, what you've written here, your research kind of further supports that, is some of the most important pillars that we can have as Christians, adults, youth, all the way through, is a very firm grasp of who Jesus is, what his ministry looked like, and then in addition to that, the support of the Bible with that. So an understanding of the Bible and its workings, and how the New Testament still fits with the Old Testament, and taking it all in as one piece to build kind of a foundation off of.
Yeah.
So the youth ministry or a youth minister, you are kind of proposing that it's not really the foundation of what a church should expect a child's faith should be. You're posing that the parents are kind of the foundation builders for these children's faith. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I don't like abstract concepts at all. So I that's why I like to iron stuff out and provide examples in detail in the book. And I take this directly from conversations I've had with the students who have come from youth programs that had this type of system in place, and I saw it repeated over and over and over again. So what that basically looks like is that mom and dad are committed to having some type of family devotional, either every night after dinner or once a week at the minimum. But there's some type of family devotional that takes place, and that devotional is basically given its catalyst, its inspiration by the resource that the youth minister has provided. So he's provided mom and dad basically a weekly worksheet that says, this is the type of stuff that we're talking about in class. And so when you do your devotional, your family devotional at home, these are some of the talking points that you might want to talk about. Certainly you can expound on this. And so what happens is that youth, that young girl, the young man has been having deep, meaningful, scripturally based conversations throughout the week with mom and dad. Then they show up on a Sunday morning to class, and they're bringing just incredibly deep insights that have come out of the home because mom and dad put that as the priority, that mom and dad saw themselves as the primary person responsible for their child's faith, and that's the way it's supposed to be. So that's how families and youth ministry work in conjunction with each other, and unfortunately, that's just not the typical setup.
So it's not typical, but how do we make that typical? How do you get the parent buy-in in church? I'm sure that there's youth ministers, clawing their hair out just trying to answer this question. Like, how do we get the youth ministry programs in churches nationwide to be a parent-led youth ministry, one where the youth minister can be that supplemental resource? How do we shift the paradigm on that?
Well, it's the leadership's responsibility. The elders need to say, this is how we're going to do it, and this is the way it's going to be. And so we're going to provide whatever resources we need to provide to families and youth ministries to make this happen. And the expectation is going to be set that, as the shepherds of the flock, we expect moms and dads to be doing this. And I think that they have the spiritual authority to do that. And if moms and dads aren't doing that, I think that's a conversation that needs to happen with the eldership and those parents, sitting down with them saying, hey, why is it that you're not doing this with your kids? Why aren't you having these studies? Why aren't you sitting down and having family time together to open up God's Word? I think that would be something that a lot of maybe elders, unfortunately, would look at and go, there's no way I'm having. I mean, if I have that conversation with these parents, they're going to go find another church.
Sure.
And maybe that's true, but that doesn't excuse the fact that I think falls into the responsibility of elders shepherding the flock and making sure that the spiritual growth and maturation of those who they are overseers of are getting that type of encouragement, and those expectations are being set. So that begins to really change the whole paradigm of what church looks like.
Well, I agree. I don't really have any real arguments there. I think my youth ministry experience is a little non-traditional, just anyways, being as exposed to the Christian Student Center as early on, and kind of those same formative years where you're in that concrete jungle of Detroit. I'm playing video games, and I'm sure being an absolute nuisance to some of those early student directors that you have on board to work in. You
were surrounded by another hugely important aspect of our Christianity is community, and you had that exposure, and it's nothing that your parents did that was just extraordinary. It was just the simple fact that your dad worked a job that kind of forced you into that situation. Sure. I don't know that we would have had the discipline to, make sure that was taking place. And that's kind of, the passion that I have for this is, it is doable, and people do a successful job at it, and it has clear results that are astounding. And so it's just a matter of flipping that switch and getting leadership and youth ministry and parents all on the same page to just decide, you know what, we're going to be intentional about this, and we're going to flip the script. We're going to do it this way. The research and the data is there, and I'm not the first person to write about it either.
No. You and I have got to do something that's actually pretty cool back-to-back weeks. So this previous week, you got to speak and give this Devo, and then I did that the week prior to you, to this group of boys. So you've got this one kid who's he's got a group called the Fab Five, as best as I'm aware, and it starts out with this core group of 5 guys in high school that they just love to hang out with each other, love to be around each other, and then you have this parent aspect, this catalyst. I'm going to say a pretty big catalyst where there's this weekly Devo that they do where it starts with 5, but shoot, well, last week it was what, 20?
Close at 17, I think. Yeah. And they had some of their regulars that were out too, but they had new faces there this week, and they had new faces there last week.
Yeah. It's amazing what can happen when, kids know that there's going to be support behind it. You can make it fun. You've had Brandon Bonner on here before. We hung out, and part of hanging out was church. Just to kind of tie into the community aspect that you were just talking about. I mean, who wants to be in a community that doesn't have any of their friends?
Yeah, I don't know.
See,
nobody.
I've got kind of one more question here, and it's maybe a little bit deeper than some of the content that we've been talking about so far, and it's on isolationism. Mm-hmm. Kind of a tongue twister there for me, but can you speak a little bit to what isolationism is?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's entered in just pretty quickly. Isolationism has always been a thing. Before social media, before cell phones, you had the teenager in the 1800s that holed himself away somewhere up with a book, probably, and kind of got out of the world. That has just been exacerbated by technology, and so what we have today is a picture of families that are all living in their own little personal bubble. So they come home, mom goes in one direction, dad goes in another direction, all the other kids go in their own separate directions. They're all holding up in isolation. They're looking at screens. There's not family interaction anymore, and that is causing a whole lot of issues. The breakdown of the family, it's a contributing factor. The loss of faith, that's a contributing factor. Exposing yourself to a lot of things in the world, through the screens that are creating havoc in the lives of young men and women. So there's just a whole lot of consequences to isolationism versus being involved and part of a robust community where there's actually live interaction one-on-one, and that has a lot of areas that it impacts for the good. So
excellent. So you're really saying that the isolationism is maybe one of those tools that Satan's using to attack our youth in full force.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah,
well,
and using it well, by the way. He's doing a really good job. He gets an A+ in being able to use our own technology against us.
Yeah. Well, that's really all the questions that I have for you today. I don't want to keep spoiling any other of the content that's left in this book. For any of you that have had any interest in any of the topics that we've talked about today, all of that's covered in The Lion, the Way, and the War. Not the podcast, the book. If you search it on Amazon, you can get it shipped directly to your home. It's a great tool for leadership, for youth, for parents, for anybody that has young children or youth-level children in their lives, or just is a member of a church, because theoretically your church is going to have those people. So make sure you check out that book, read the resource that Craig has put together, and then finally make sure you give us some feedback on The Lion, the Way, and the War, hosted by Harrison Allison.
I got to say, this has been extremely uncomfortable being on this side of things. So now I have a new appreciation for the guests that I have on this show.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you going to close this out, or am I closing this out?
I've got a closer ready to go.
Okay.
So
have at it.
As always, be a better follower of the podcast than I am. Make sure you share and subscribe, both on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you consume your media. Until next time on our podcast of The Lion, the Way of the War, love one another. be kind to one another, and remember the creator of the universe loves you so much that he gave his only son for you. Have a blessed day.